I was 41, and after 16 years in operations, I thought I had seen every kind of crisis a company could stage. My name is Rena Caldwell, the woman who kept the gears turning while everyone else chased applause. I was calm by nature, methodical, maybe too quiet for a place that rewarded noise. That Friday morning, the city was half frozen, the kind of Chicago cold that makes the air itself feel brittle. I arrived early, as always, coffee in hand, ready to check the week's logistics report. My keycard didn't work. The red light blinked twice, then died. I tried again. Nothing. For a second, I blamed the door. Then I noticed the IT technician standing by the elevators, staring down at his shoes like a kid caught stealing. My stomach tightened. When I finally reached my desk, the monitor refused my login. Access denied. My phone line was dead. Around me, screens hummed, keyboards clattered. Mine was the only one dark. Before I could ask, Martin's assistant appeared too quickly, too rehearsed. Mandatory team meeting, conference room B. Now, inside, 20 people sat in neat rows. Martin Hale stood at the head of the table, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like he'd just finished saving the company. "Let's keep this brief," he said, clicking his laptop. Effective immediately. Operations is restructuring. The projector flickered. On the screen, a slide titled, Exiting Staff. My name, Rena Caldwell, appeared in bold. A murmur spread through the room. Martin smiled small, satisfied. "Some people don't adapt to change," he continued. "Some think they're irreplaceable. But here, no one is above the team." He looked straight at me. "You'll receive a severance offer by end of day. If you're smart, you'll sign it by Friday. Otherwise," he let the words hang, then leaned back. "You'll never work in this city again." No one moved. The silence was heavy, metallic. I closed my notebook, slipped the pen into my pocket, and stood. My legs felt steady. My hands didn't. Outside the glass doors, winter wind hit my face. I kept walking until the building shrank behind me. My phone buzzed once in my coat pocket, an unknown number calling. The wind coming off the river sliced through my coat as I stepped onto Wacker Drive. I didn't know where I was walking just away. The city felt too loud, too bright. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, this time leaving a voicemail. At the bus stop, I pressed play. A man's voice steady, low. "Don't sign anything." I heard what he said. Then silence. No name, no explanation. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. The message was only 7 seconds, but it felt like a door cracking open in a locked room. I played it again, then again, trying to place the voice. Maybe someone from accounting, maybe a contractor who'd been in that meeting. My hands were shaking too much to think straight. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the lights off, replaying the words until my phone battery died. "Don't sign anything." Each time I heard them, the humiliation of the day shifted slightly, less final, more suspended, whoever that was. They had heard Martin threaten me. I wasn't crazy. It had happened exactly the way I remembered. Sleep never came. I watched the sky lighten through the blinds, cold coffee untouched beside me. When my inbox refreshed at 6:14 a.m., there it was, an email from HR. Subject line, severance agreement. Confidential. I opened it. 3 weeks' pay. In exchange for silence. The clauses were thick with legal glue, non-disparagement, non-compete, voluntary resignation. Even therapy would count as public disclosure. I scrolled down to the signature line and felt my chest tighten. Then the phone lit up again. Same unknown number. This time, a text. "I can help you." I didn't move. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the radiator. The city outside was waking up traffic. Sirens. Life going on as if nothing had happened. I turned the phone over in my hand and read the message once more. By noon, The text still sat unanswered. I couldn't bring myself to reply, but I also couldn't delete it. My fingers hovered over the screen before setting the phone face down. If someone said they could help, I needed to be sure I wasn't walking into another trap. Instead, I opened my laptop. The company had locked my accounts. But I'd always kept backups old drives filled with reports, timesheets, invoices. Not because I expected trouble. I just didn't trust chaos. I'd built my career around preventing it. The folders opened slowly, like waking ghosts. I clicked through spreadsheets from the last 5 years. Names, hours, approvals, and then patterns. Overtime marked adjusted. Contracts labeled independent consultant for people who'd been sitting beside me for years. My own files carried 2 different job codes. I'd never noticed before, too busy fixing everyone else's errors to look at my own. Emails appeared next, thousands of them. Martin's words threaded through them, all short. Urgent messages with no subject line. Fix this. Don't tell finance. Roll hours forward. Delete the audit trail. Each one harmless alone. But together they painted a story I had lived without fully seeing. At some point, the sun dipped behind the buildings, my apartment filled with that deep blue light before darkness. The heater clicked on, rattling softly. I kept reading. Notes from HR calls, screenshots of temporary adjustments, messages from colleagues who'd quietly complained, then vanished. I created a new folder and named it simply Receipts. Inside, I dragged everything: emails, timesheets, the memo where Martin promised bonuses next quarter, the file where he'd replaced my name with his on a project summary. Hours passed. The city outside blurred into night traffic. My eyes burned, but I felt steadier than I had in days. For years, I'd been invisible, an unseen pair of hands holding things together. Now that same invisibility was saving me. They hadn't noticed what I kept, what I remembered, what I documented. Somewhere in that quiet, I realized I wasn't defenseless. I had proof, and proof, I was beginning to understand, was power. The name in the text, Ava Rios, employment law, came with an address just off State Street. I stared at it for nearly an hour before going. Something about the simplicity of it made me trust it more than I wanted to admit. No fancy firm name, no sweet number boasting skyline views, just a line in an old building near the river. Snow flurried as I pushed through the glass door. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and paper. A single plaque on the wall listed her name and one other tenant, a dentist. My reflection in the elevator's scratched metal door looked exhausted, hair pulled back, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness but steady. Ava's office was small, sunlit through narrow windows. No receptionist, no waiting room chatter, only the soft scratch of a pen. She looked up from her desk and smiled. The kind of smile that didn't try too hard. Mid-30s, maybe. Sharp eyes behind plain glasses. "You must be Rena," she said, extending her hand. "Have a seat. Tell me what happened, only what you can prove." I told her everything. The public firing, the severance email, the anonymous message, the files I'd kept. She didn't interrupt once, only nodded, taking notes in looping cursive with a heavy black fountain pen. Every few minutes, she underlined something twice, her brows tightening. When I finished, the silence in the room changed. Ava leaned back, tapping the pen against her pad. "What your boss did isn't just cruel," she said finally. "It's illegal. Multiple times over." She spoke plainly: retaliation for reporting payroll discrepancies, misclassification of employees, unpaid overtime, coercive severance clauses. Each term landed like a small stone on solid ground. "You've got leverage," she added. "More than you think." I exhaled without realizing I'd been holding my breath. She slid a note card across the desk. "Bring everything you can prove, every file, every timestamp, every email. We'll make them listen." Outside, the wind had softened, and for the first time since that Friday, I didn't feel erased. The cold still bit, but the air carried something else, a thin, unfamiliar thread of steadiness. 3 days after meeting Ava, a courier appeared at my apartment door. The envelope he carried was thick, heavy with embossed lettering from a downtown law firm I recognized from billboards, one of those firms that represented corporations, not people. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside was a letter written in polished legal venom. They denied every allegation, accused me of misinterpretation, and demanded all disputes be settled in private arbitration. The final pages were worse copies of cherry-picked emails meant to paint me as unprofessional and combative. Each line felt like a slap. By the time I reached Ava's office, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. She read the packet quietly, eyes moving quickly down the pages. Then she smirked. "Classic intimidation," she said, setting the papers aside. "They're testing how scared you are." Her calm steadied me more than any speech could. She pulled out my evidence folder and began matching each of their accusations with receipts. "They say you missed deadlines," she murmured. "Here's the project log showing you finished ahead of schedule with client praise attached." She flipped another page. "They call you defiant. Here's Martin's email ordering you to break policy. You followed his words exactly. We worked for hours, assembling timelines and cross-referencing files. Ava's process was precise, surgical. When I faltered, she'd refill my coffee and keep typing. "They count on exhaustion," she said once. "We answer with precision." By evening, the reply was finished, 20 pages of evidence, citations, and quiet fury. Ava printed the last page, scanned it, and handed me a copy. "I'll send it tonight." Back home, I sat at my kitchen table and read the draft again. The closing line stopped me cold retaliation claims supported by contemporaneous witness texts. It wasn't loud or angry. It was final. For the first time since that day in the conference room, my body unclenched. The city hummed outside, snow tapping against the window, and I realized I might finally sleep through the night. The snow had started to melt when Ava called. Her voice carried a restrained excitement I hadn't heard before. "You might want to check your personal email," she said. "Something just came in." Attached was a forwarded message from a former colleague still inside the company, a quiet, loyal friend who'd avoided taking sides when everything fell apart. The subject line read, "Client inquiry urgent." I opened it. The email came from one of our largest accounts, a national retailer whose logistics we'd handled for years. The client's tone was polite but firm. "We've noticed delays and discrepancies since Ms. Rena Caldwell's departure. Could you confirm who's now managing our operations? Deliverables are slipping, and timelines aren't being met." I read it 3 times before it sank in. My name, right there, in black and white. Not erased, not forgotten. Proof that my work had mattered, that the silence in that boardroom hadn't rewritten the truth. When I met Ava later that afternoon, she printed the email and slid it into a clear folder as if it were a rare artifact. "This," she said, tapping the page, "is a gift from the heavens. Independent validation from a multi-million-dollar client. They've admitted operational decline tied directly to your absence." I watched her underline 2 sentences and add a sticky note, "Material risk fiduciary impact." Her efficiency almost made me laugh. "You know what this means, right?" she said. "He fired the person keeping the system alive. That's negligence. Corporate, not personal." Outside her window, the L rumbled past, shaking the blinds. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I thought about the years I'd spent fixing their mistakes quietly, believing invisibility was the price of stability. Now, the thing that had made me unseen had become the evidence of how deeply I'd held everything together. Ava smiled as she tucked the folder into her briefcase. "They just handed us leverage," she said, "and I don't intend to waste it." The boardroom was colder than I remembered. A long glass table stretched beneath the fluorescent lights, polished to a mirror sheen. At one end sat Martin, flanked by 2 corporate attorneys in identical gray suits. He didn't look at me as I entered. Ava walked beside me, carrying only a slim black folder. No briefcase, no laptop, just that folder and her calm. One of the attorneys cleared his throat. "We're here to resolve this matter efficiently," he began, his tone syrupy. "There's no need for hostility." Ava didn't sit. She rested her hand lightly on the folder and said, "Then let's not waste time." She opened it and began sliding documents across the table, one by one. "Payroll logs," she said. "Each line shows missing overtime hours. State law requires treble damages for this kind of wage theft." The younger attorney frowned. "We'll need to verify," Ava cut him off without raising her voice. "You will, but while you do, note the pattern." She placed a stack of printed emails beside the logs, each with Martin's terse handwriting. "Fix this." "Don't tell finance." Then came the text messages from my coworkers the night of my firing, time-stamped, apologetic, raw. "These are contemporaneous witness statements," she said, confirming public humiliation and threats of financial ruin. The room went still. Ava's voice never shifted. She was steady, surgical. "Next," she said, sliding forward the client's email. "A major account acknowledging operational decline tied directly to Ms. Caldwell's termination. That's material risk. Concealing it from the board would be a breach of fiduciary duty." Martin finally spoke, his voice cracking slightly. "That email is out of context." Ava turned to him. "Context?" She reached for the final document, the severance packet, and laid it gently in front of the board chair. "This document is riddled with illegal clauses. The non-compete is unenforceable. The NDA attempts to silence whistleblowing. The voluntary resignation is falsified. If this reaches court, sanctions will follow." No one moved. The attorneys exchanged glances. Martin's face drained of color. The silence that filled the room wasn't fear anymore. It was recognition. Ava closed her folder, the faint click echoing like a verdict. 3 days passed before anything arrived. The city was thawing, patches of dirty snow melting along the sidewalks. When the courier buzzed my apartment again, this time, the envelope he handed me was thin, no weight of arrogance, no embossed threat, just plain paper sealed neatly at the edges. I set it on the table and stared for a moment before opening it. Inside were only a few pages. The letterhead was the same, but the tone was different. It began with a single line. "In the interest of resolution, the company has agreed to the following terms." I read slowly, afraid to blink. "Full back pay, treble damages for unpaid wages, coverage of all legal fees, a neutral reference letter signed by the board chair." And then, a paragraph that made my breath catch. "The company retracts prior statements regarding Ms. Caldwell's conduct and acknowledges her contributions to operational success." At the very bottom, in smaller font, one last line waited. "Executive Martin Hale has resigned effective immediately." I read it twice, maybe 3 times, until the words stopped vibrating. My hands loosened around the paper. There was no rush of triumph, no cinematic swell, just a deep, steady quiet, filling the space where fear had lived. I carried the letter to the window. Outside, the city moved on cars gliding through slush, people bundled against the wind, unaware that a single sentence on a legal document had just ended months of humiliation. The world didn't change, but something in me had. When I called Ava, she didn't sound surprised. "They folded faster than I expected," she said simply. "Justice tends to sound like paperwork." I smiled faintly, watching my reflection fade into the glass. The fight was over. No headlines, no applause, just proof. And for the first time in weeks, I let out a long breath that felt like starting over. Spring crept back into the city, slowly bare trees softening with green, the river turning from gray to glass. The letter from the settlement sat folded in my desk drawer, untouched since the day it arrived. I didn't frame it. I didn't need to. What mattered now was what came next. It started with an email. The subject line read, "Reconnecting." The sender was a familiar name, the client whose message had changed everything. They'd noticed my absence once. Now they wanted to know if I was available for a short-term contract, something to stabilize their supply chain. I hesitated before replying. The offer attached was twice my old salary. I registered the business that same week, Caldwell Operations Consulting, one laptop, one rented desk in a shared workspace on the north side, sunlight pouring through wide old windows. No corner offices, no locked doors, just air and quiet. Within a month, I had my first team. Jamie, a data analyst who'd left the company after years of being overlooked, and Malik, one of the warehouse supervisors Martin had shortchanged on overtime. Both said yes without hesitation. We worked late that first week, hunched over takeout boxes, rebuilding systems from the ground up, transparent, fair, documented. It felt strange to make decisions without permission. Stranger still to realize how much I'd learned from the wreckage I'd escaped. Every spreadsheet, every client call, every small moment of trust became part of a structure that finally made sense. Sometimes, when the afternoon light slanted across the desks, I'd think of Martin's old office, all glass, all show, and the boardroom where everything had turned. My office had no glass walls, only shelves of plants and the sound of typing mixed with laughter. When the contract renewal came through, the client wrote one line in their email. "It's good to have someone who actually understands the work." I printed it and pinned it to the corkboard, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Some rebuilds don't start with ambition, they start with survival, then slowly, carefully, turn into something worth keeping. The first snow of winter came early that year. It brushed against the office windows like a memory, quiet and weightless. Jamie had left a thermos of coffee on my desk before heading out, and Malik had forgotten his gloves again, both of them promising to finish the new proposal Monday morning. The place felt different now, lived in, honest. When the door clicked shut, I opened the bottom drawer. The retraction letter was still there, folded neatly between invoices and a stack of fresh notebooks. The paper had softened at the edges, the ink faint from where I'd read it too many times that first week. I traced a fingertip along the sentence that once mattered so much. Any statements previously made regarding Miss Caldwell's conduct were inaccurate and regrettable. I smiled, faintly. I didn't need to frame it. I didn't need proof anymore. The letter had done its work quietly, precisely, and the rest was mine to build. Outside, Chicago was caught between seasons again, snow mixing with slush, sky low and silver. I slipped on my coat and locked the door behind me. The hallway smelled of coffee and printer ink, the kind of everyday scent that once belonged to someone else's office, someone else's rules. On the street, the cold bit through the air, but it felt clean this time, not punishing. Traffic hummed along State Street, lights flickering in the shop windows. I stopped at the corner, watching the river catch pieces of ice as it drifted under the bridge. For a long moment, I stood there, breathing it in the city, the sound, the stillness after the noise. Then I whispered to no one in particular. Friday came and went, and I'm still here. The words hung in the air, steady and true. I pulled my scarf tighter, feeling the weight of the years fall away. There was no need to look back. The story was finished, and the silence it left behind didn't feel empty. It felt like freedom,